Long before people cooked their food inside animal stomachs, for most of human history, a warm bowl of soup was physically impossible. Not because people didn't want it, but because there was nothing on earth they could use to boil water in. This is not a story about an invention. It is a story about survival, and about how many people didn't make it before one simple object changed everything. A glowing red-hot stone dropped into animal stomach basin of water, steam exploding upward in the firelight. Infants and elders dying through brutal winters, not from war, not from disease, but from food that was simply too hard to eat. In the first crude clay vessel ever fired in human history, the object that quietly gave our species a fighting chance. This is the true story of cooking pots, and it starts somewhere you'd never expect. Think about the last time you boiled water. Pasta, soup, tea, rice. It takes a few minutes and almost no thought, but for most of human existence, that action was not just difficult, it was impossible. For the earliest humans, cooking meant one thing: fire and meat. You caught something, you held it over a flame, and you ate it. No soups, no broths, no soft food of any kind, just charred meat, hard roots, and whatever could be chewed raw. And here is where the human cost begins. In northern Europe, Siberia, and across the Arctic, where winters lasted 6 months and temperatures dropped far below freezing, this diet was a death sentence for the most vulnerable. Infants could not chew tough meat. The elderly lost their teeth and could no longer process solid food. Pregnant women needed more calories than raw or roasted food could reliably provide. Entire family groups weakened through winter, not from attack or illness, but simply from the inability to extract enough energy from what they had. Soft, liquid food, the kind that requires boiling, was the difference between making it to spring and not. For thousands of years, that food did not exist. The problem was not knowledge, it was physics. To boil water, you need a container that can hold liquid and withstand direct heat at the same time. Wood burns, bone cracks, unprocessed stone shatters unevenly. And animal hide, while flexible and waterproof, melts when placed directly over a flame. Every material available to early humans and failed the same basic test. So the question becomes, how do you heat water if you cannot put your container near fire at all? But here's where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. The answer was to forget the container entirely. Instead of bringing fire to the water, bring the heat inside it. This is the technique known as stone boiling, and it is one of the most practical solutions in the history of human survival. Here is how it worked. A hunter-gatherer would take a fresh animal stomach, bladder, or intestine, cleaned and stretched taut between sticks, and fill it with water and food. Roots, bone marrow, scraps of meat, all dropped inside an organ that hours earlier had been part of a living animal. Stones were placed directly into the fire until they glowed red. Then, using wooden or bone tongs, those stones were lifted and dropped one by one into the water inside the organ. Within minutes, the water boiled. As stones cooled, fresh hot ones replaced them to keep the temperature. The result was real broth, real soup, cooked not in a pot but inside the body of an animal. That is not a metaphor. What looks strange from a modern perspective was, in its time, a life-saving piece of engineering. This is not guesswork. In Ireland, ancient stone boiling sites called Fulacht Fayad, low mounds near water, filled with fire-cracked stones, have been dated back over 3,500 years, with some evidence going much further. Researchers who reconstructed one found it could bring a large volume of water, to a full boil in under 30 minutes. The same technique appears in indigenous North America, across Siberia, and throughout the Pacific, independently, repeatedly, across thousands of years of human history. Stone boiling was not a desperate last resort. It was a reliable method, used by people who understood their environment deeply. But it had limits. It was slow, it required constant attention, and the basins could only be used a few times before they failed. The real breakthrough came around 20,000 years ago, in what is now southern China and Japan. Fragments of the earliest known fired ceramic vessels have been found there, rough, thick-walled, and uneven, but capable of sitting directly over a fire without cracking. For the first time, a dedicated cooking vessel existed. What followed changed the human species in ways that are still debated today. Boiled food delivers more usable calories than raw or roasted food from the same ingredients. Softened starches and broth gave infants, the elderly, and the sick a way to eat when solid food was no longer an option. Some researchers, including anthropologist Richard Wrangham, have argued that cooking itself, and specifically boiling, may have driven changes in human jaw size, gut length, and even brain development over thousands of years. The idea is still contested, but the question it raises is genuinely uncomfortable. What if the cooking pot did not just change what we ate, but what we became? Ceramic technology spread unevenly. In the Middle East and Africa, clay vessels appear around 10,000 years ago, coinciding with the first settled farming communities. As people stopped moving, feeding larger groups from stored grain became essential, and the pot became central to that. Metal came later. Bronze pots appear around 3000 BC, used mainly by the wealthy. Cast iron was developed in China around 500 BC and reached Europe in the medieval period. A good iron pot was a valued household object, repaired, passed down, sometimes listed in wills. The last unexpected chapter came in 1938. A chemist in New Jersey discovered a waxy, slippery substance while working on refrigerant gas, something that resisted heat and repelled everything it touched. It was called Teflon. It wasn't applied to cookware until the 1950s, when a French engineer's wife noticed it on his fishing tackle and wondered whether it might work on a pan. The nonstick surface was an accident born from a fishing trip. And that's the part of the story most people never hear. Every pot on your stove today carries the answer to a problem that once decided who lived and who didn't. The infants who couldn't chew. The elders who couldn't swallow. The families in Siberia and Northern Europe who ran out of options before spring arrived. A cooking pot did not just change what humans ate. It changed who got to survive. The next time you fill a pot with water and turn on the stove, that is worth a moment of thought. What you are holding is not just cookware. It is a solution to a problem that cost lives for thousands of years, and now sits quietly in your kitchen, waiting to be used. That's the true story behind cooking pots. If you want more stories like this, make sure you're subscribed. What do you think is hiding in the history of something else in your kitchen? Let me know in the comments below.